No problem.
It's live right now.
Hello. Welcome, everyone.
Hey, everybody. My name is Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade, and I am here with my two colleagues today. So, for us to be able to talk about a really important topic. And I am a licensed psychologist. I'm the executive director at A Healing Paradigm. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Samuel Maddox, who is a child psychologist, but he is also a professor. Hey, we see you've got folks that jumped on already. And then and Dr. Maddox specializes in working with children and particularly African American males. And then I'm also here with my other colleague, Calvin Smith, who is a certified school psychologist and an assessment coordinator at A Healing Paradigm. And so we are here to have this conversation with you today. And I told them that my facilitation isn't going to be much, so I'm just going to talk very little. One of the things that I want to do in this conversation is to draw the folks that are here that have questions about being able to protect African American males. So if you have questions, do me a favor, put those in the chat so we can answer those questions for you. Or if you just have ideas or just want to kind of comment on this topic, we know that we are dealing with a lot of racial violence, and that racial violence is specifically directed at African American males, and particularly we know that that starts very early with our boys, and so we want to specifically talk about how do we protect our children. So my first question that I already told them to prepare them for is to talk about the context of this work and them being African American men growing up in this society and how that impacts the work that they do. So I'm going to throw that out to them and let them start.
All right. Mr. Smith, did you want to go first or is it okay?
Go first, respect the elders.
I appreciate it. So I often talk about when I'm teaching class about how really my childhood experiences did lead me into psychology, specifically growing up as an African American male in Atlanta, which is also in Georgia. Everybody knows if you step 10 miles outside of Atlanta, you in Georgia. So kind of that dynamic, Atlanta being the Black Mecca, but then you're also in Georgia, a very southern conservative state, recognizing the impact of my parents' sort of socialization, how they were raising me, the things that they were teaching me, how that impacted me versus things I saw going on with my friends growing up, which troubled me to some extent in the fact of, were they getting those similar experiences? Were they getting those kind of parenting experiences I was able to have where I was both empowered to believe that I could accomplish and I could achieve, but I was also informed of the systemic barriers that I would have to face in order to be successful in life. And so I do appreciate being able to kind of have that balance. And it led me to make sure that I talk with parents, kids about that sort of balance in their life, about having both that empowerment but also that awareness of the systemic oppression. And so, again, seeing a lot of, my friends when we're growing up, saw people on kind of either end of the spectrum where completely kind of unaware and sometimes get blindsided by systemic racism, and others who were completely aware of the systemic racism but were demoralized by it before even trying. And so kind of a learned helplessness, demoralization process. And so I wanted to be able to hit that healthy balance, again, where we feel the power to be able to fight against the system, but we're not sheltered and delusional that the system of oppression does exist.
What were some of the things that your parents did to help protect you that you were talking about?
So I mentioned the Atlanta piece. One of the big things was essentially connected me to the civil rights movement and the aspect of the civil rights movement here in Atlanta. And again, a lot of those figures were still active back when I was growing up in the 70s and the 80s. So I was actually able to meet at some instances and even interact with major political figures in the civil rights movement. And so my parents were able to teach me about that, teach me about that struggle, that fight. And so again, that created that balance in that look, I see what we were actually fighting for, and I see that by fighting, we were able to make accomplishments. We were able to help our community and strengthen our community. So again, that helped me to recognize it's out there, but you also have the power to fight it.
And Calvin, how about you? How did talk about your experiences?
I was sitting here like, oh man, I got the opportunity to occupy a lot of Black spaces. So I didn't have. So I grew up in Chicago, the South Side. I didn't have that. It wasn't until I moved to Georgia that I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of like Dr. Maddox was saying. Oh, this is Georgia.
Yeah.
I didn't experience that till I got to Georgia. I experienced different racial injustices. Yes. So my earliest one was even when I was not pulled over, but stopped by the police after leaving a grocery store. So that was my 8th grade. Oh yeah, you didn't know that. So
no, you didn't tell me that one.
Because I think it doesn't even come up in conversation because I think it's sort of like a rite of passage. Like, oh, you can stop too. Like that is just a common thing. And so my earliest experience of that was the 8th grade. And it was funny because I was trying to do the right thing. So I went in, we had like a classroom party. I went to the grocery store. I grabbed some candy. And for those who know me, know I am super frugal. So I went to the chip aisle. I was like, well, the chips can feed more people for less money. So we gonna do these chips. And I said, well, I'm not gonna leave the candy here. I'm gonna take it back to where I got it from. So I took it back to where I got it from, paid for the chips, left the store, and like a car rushes up to the entrance and just starts, I say, verbally assaulting me. Where's it at? Where's it at? And I'm like, where's what? Like, what are you talking about? Where's it? I saw you in the camera. Where's it at? And I am confused, literally confused. Why is this man yelling at me? And this was a Black officer. So it wasn't even the white Black thing, but more of just policing. And that I had to take the bus to get to school, so I missed my bus because he just had to see and look through my backpack, and then when he saw I didn't steal anything, he was like, "Oh yeah, sorry." I don't even know if he said sorry, but just brushed it off as if that encounter didn't mean something. So I think those types of experiences shape just kind of how I move through the world. That, and then also being empowered by my family and educators. So like I said, I went to predominantly Black schools through college. I was fortunate enough to I did engage in extracurriculars that were more diverse, but my teachers, my family, my church, all of that kind of helped to empower me and to kind of not let me get jaded, I guess, in this work, and just to help empower others.
So I think that's an interesting comment when you say that you were in these predominantly Black environments, because I know, like for myself, I wasn't. And I think about how that has an impact on children when they're not in environments where the people look like them, the people that are educating them, that when they go to church or other community activities, the people don't look like them. So just let's start there and just talk a little bit about that and the psychological impact of children being in environments where people not only don't look like them, but don't like them.
I go back to the word demoralization because I again, kind of navigating both of those spaces. So predominantly living in Atlanta, but then also my dad, as you both know, was in the cleaning service. And so sometimes I would go with him to these families who were predominantly not families of color. And just kind of the different interaction when I was in those spaces where it was clear there was a different sort of hierarchy in their mind, and how that essentially weighed even subconsciously, even though it wasn't outward and spoken. You're still a kid, you want to fit in, you want people to like you, you want to kind of be a part, but then there's literally this barrier there that, like, why is it there? There's no reason for it. And again, this is coupled with if you're receiving positive messages in your space of, you're smart, you're capable, you're a good person, it really ends up being very counter. And so I found myself struggling, and I also see this quite a bit in others, where, again, they're not in those spaces, but they're with the kind of why me? Why is this happening to me? And then having to get deep into it literally is just because of me being Black. It's literally just because of who I am. And again, where the demoralization, you can start to feel powerless if you stay in that space. And the fact of, well, I'm Black. I can't change that. I don't want to change that. How can I then overcome this? And so that's why I think that next piece comes in of you got to acknowledge that. And I always kind of get emotional when I see kids having to go through that. But we have to also make sure we do the next part of, yes, you're experiencing these are things that's going to happen, but here's how you're going to be able to navigate and move through it.
What about you, Calvin?
It's complicated. So like I think because I was empowered, I think that's the word for me. Like I was empowered in the spaces that I was in, because just because you are occupying a Black space doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be empowered in that area.
Oh, say that one again. That's truth right there.
It depends. And so there was this undertone. I don't know if anybody explicitly told me, but there was this undertone of, yes, you have to work 3 times as hard to get the same thing. So I did have that piece kind of playing in my head of like, you have to do this. Like, this is what, like, only excellence was acceptable. And then I had those teachers. I remember one, like she was very specific about the difference between a 0 and the letter O, and you couldn't switch them. If you were spelling her name, or if you were using a math problem, you couldn't say, "Oh, that was out." So like there was this certain level of excellence and expectation that I was able to latch on to and understand that there was still love behind that. But it kind of also, when I got to, so for example, when I got to Georgia, and there was, to me, I think, a very clear, oh, this is kind of a racist, institutionally systemic racial problem, that I was like, but wait, huh? Like how do I handle this? And so I did it was a very weird, experience, because I did what I thought I should do, and even that didn't.
Problematic.
Yeah, that was very problematic.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but I'm like, I know that was problematic.
Very problematic, because it was, and how it made me feel in hindsight, it was like, this Black boy is commanding respect. Why does he think he can do that? And at the end of the day, it was a decision of, okay, do I want to graduate or not? And I had to kind of, I chose to swallow that bullet, because I'm like, I didn't know any other options at that moment. That I had people on my side who were saying, yeah, no, you didn't do anything wrong, but here's how you get out of it. And so going forward, that's just kind of how I started navigating these spaces. How do you empower the kids, but also teach them how to advocate appropriately and work through those situations in a way that doesn't belittle their being.
And the thing that impacts me that you just said is that you figured out how to swallow that bullet. That's like a pretty deep metaphor. So whether it's like actual physical violence that leads to a death, or symbolic violence that has an impact on us. I see a question. I want to ask y'all this question. It says, when we give the quote unquote talk, what are some things you suggest that we discuss with our sons?
So I go back again to the important part is that empowerment, kind of even like Calvin was saying, that kind of view that you are good, you are going to be powerful in this situation, and the fact of you have the capability to be able to fight against the system, but also recognizing that sort of need for adaptation. And I think that's where that challenge comes in. So, like Calvin was even saying about swallowing the bullet and kind of how to be able to adapt, there needs to be that guidance there. And there needs to be this discussion of, we're here to support you when you're facing these things, when you're going through these things, we're here to support you. come to us. Make sure you come to us, because a lot of times, and boys are going to hold things in. They may not want to share. And again, if that awareness isn't there, again, because I got to highlight, I had friends who were kind of clueless to things about oppression and racism, and was like, "Oh, that's not happening. Oh, that wasn't because of race." And no, it is. I'm pretty sure it is. So that awareness has to be there, but even with that awareness, sometimes there's resistance to come ask for help, especially with boys coming, hey, I had this problem, or this teacher's treating me this way, or these people are kind of treating me unfairly. But we need to encourage that kind of open help and dialogue. I was thinking it was something in the news recently about this mom took her son to a restaurant, and how they were discriminated against the child because of what he was wearing, and then there was another white kid there that had the exact same or similar outfit on. But I was just kind of pleased at how the mom kind of modeled